All right, so moving on to green. We're going to start off with Abundant Harvest. So Abundant Harvest is actually just an interesting one to note because it actually got a sort of a sneak preview printing in that it was in the Mystical Archives for the most recent standard set, Strixhaven, and it was the only card printed that didn't actually exist already. Every other card in the Mystical Archives was a reprint of an existing card. This one was a new card, so people were like, "Oh, what is this?" And then they're like, "Oh yeah, it's actually a card from Modern Horizons 2. We just kind of gave you a little sneak preview on it," which I thought was fun. And it's actually a decent little card, honestly. As green cantrips go, this is about as consistent as it gets. This will always get you a card. You're never going to whiff on this. There have been other versions of this card where it's like, look at the top 3 cards, 4 cards, 6 cards in your library, and put a land or creature from among them in your hand. But it's possible and has happened. It's happened to me on Arena. That those cards just whiff. You just don't find the card you need in the top X, right? This one you just name land or non-land, and then you just go until you get one of those. So if you really need to make a land drop this turn or next turn, choose land. You'll go until you find a land. Now you've got that guaranteed land drop. You're off to the races. Great. If it's later in the game, you've got lots of land, you just kind of want to draw some action, you're now guaranteed to draw action. You just name non-land. And the quality of your action will be depending on the quality of your deck, obviously, but you will always find a non-land spell. You will always get a thing to cast. So it's very, very flexible, and it's very, very consistent in what it does. I also kind of noted, sort of to myself with some amusement, that it's actually a riff on the card Abundance, which is a really, really old enchantment for 4 mana that basically replaced every instance of draw card with this happening. So this is basically a one-shot abundance effect called Abundant Harvest, which, makes sense. So that's a fun little reference to an old cool card for sure. But again, yeah, a solid green cantrip. Again, if you're in blue, you can probably do better than this by just drawing a bunch of cards. But in non-blue green decks, this card is strong. I honestly think it is. Okay, our next card is our first green commander. It's another name that I'm going to have trouble pronouncing here. It's Evie? I don't know. I'm going to go with Evie and Eve. I'm going to go with Eve. Do you know what? I'm going to say it's Eve, and I'm going to say it's Eve because it's a joke because it is called Progenitor Ooze, so I'm going to guess that perhaps the name is a vague biblical reference to Eve from the Bible, who of course is, according to the Bible, one of the progenitors of the human race. Maybe I'm totally off base with that, but I'm going to call it Eve, and again, somebody can correct me in the comments or in the chat if you disagree. But yeah, so Eve, Progenitor Ooze, 2 green for a 2/2 legendary creature ooze with Storm. So basically it says it has Storm, so basically you copy this card for however many spells have been cast so far this turn. So if you've and it does count itself for what it's worth. So you're always going to get at least 1 extra copy anytime you cast Eve. If it's basically, yeah, so if you've cast 3 spells including Eve, you're going to get 3 copies of Eve. So you'll have 4 Eves total. And obviously to get around the legend rule, Eve Progenitor Ooze isn't legendary if it's a token. I know that friend of the stream, DC Rayner, has some issues with the templating on this card, and I'm not going to disabuse him of that notion. It's an inelegant. It's very flavorful because it's really cool that the Ooze tribal commander makes multiples of itself, because that's what oozes do, right? They reproduce. It is a very flavorful commander with a very inelegant design in order to make it happen. Because of course, Storm plus legendary plus permanent equals legend rule normally, so they have to just include a weird artificial rider to make that not the case. But it does make the card read a little wonkily. And then, yeah, Eve enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each other ooze you control. So, of course, that counts all the other oozes. So if you get 4 oozes out of the Storm, each of them will individually enter with 3 extra 1/1 counters for each other ooze. And if you already had some other oozes on the battlefield, because there are a number of ooze creatures in the history of Magic, you'll get that many more 1/1 counters. So yeah, they multiply and they get bigger and they do the ooze thing. It's very flavorful. So yeah, ooze. People have been searching for ooze commander. Rejoice! This is your time. All right. Speaking of niche tribes that didn't have commanders until now, we have Fang, Squirrel General, which I really hate because it's a little on the nose, in my opinion, in terms of like what this card is. Like, yes, this card can be your general. Sorry. Also, that's a bit of an old school reference because yeah, commanders were referred to as generals before the format was officially sanctioned by Wizards. But yeah, so this is your commander that lets you do the tribal squirrel thing. So it is a 3-mana 3/3 legendary creature squirrel warrior with Forest Walk. So Forest Walk again is a recurring old mechanic that we haven't seen in a long time. But basically, X walk, land walk, basically can't be blocked as long as the player being attacked has the land in question. So basically, if you're ever attacking somebody with a forest, they cannot block Fang. But if they only have like islands and plains, then they can block. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. So basically, and that does work with just other squirrel tokens. So again, I'm going to combo with Chatterstorm here for a second, just because it's right next to it. It kind of works. So basically, Chatterstorm is 1 and a green, make a 1/1 green squirrel, but it has Storm. So let's say I have Storm 3. So I'm creating 4 squirrel tokens. If I have a Chatterfang out as well, when I'm casting Chatterstorm, I'm actually going to make 8 squirrel tokens because each token is adding 1 extra 1/1 squirrel to it. So it's almost like a weird like doubling season or parallel lives, but specifically it makes squirrels instead of just another one of the one it made. So if I'm making 2 beast tokens and I have a Chatterfang out, I will make 2 beast tokens and also 2 squirrel tokens. So it's a little like weird, but bottom line is it basically just anytime you make a token, also make a 1/1 squirrel for each token that you made that way. It's kind of cool. And then it has and then here's the part where it kind of gets to like cheat a little bit. It's not a mono green commander. It's actually a green black commander. And that's because it does have this little telling black activated ability of sacrifice X squirrels. Target creature gets +X, -X until end of turn. So you can basically throw a bunch of your own squirrels under the bus in order to either buff a large creature. Just be careful though, because it will get -X. So you can either buff a creature with enough toughness that it won't die and give it a ton more power, or you can use it as a removal spell to like, sacrifice 3 squirrels, give target creature -3 or +3 -3. But if you give a 3/3 +3 -3, it'll just die, right? It'll be a 6/0 and die to state-based effects. So yeah, basically this ability more or less could be anything. It exists largely just so that Chatterfang is a black-green general as opposed to just a mono-green commander. We will briefly talk about Chatterstorm. I guess it is sort of squirrel empty the warrens, right? You only get 1 per iteration, but it also costs 2 instead of 4. It's pretty cool. It doesn't scale as well as Empty the Warrens does, but it's cheaper to cast, so it like is easier to fit into a storm turn than Empty the Warrens is. It'll make you like 4, 5 squirrels if you're like setting it up reasonably well. It's a fun card. It's mostly a silly meme card, but it is kind of fun. Chitter Spitter is yet more squirrel tribal nonsense. They're really like squirrels is the black-green archetype for limited for Modern Horizons 2, so we're basically just getting a bunch of brand new nonsensical squirrel cards, which is really funny. So this one is 2 and a green. It's a colored, so it's a green artifact, a colored artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice a token. If you do, put an acorn counter on Chitter Spitter. Again, flavor reasons more than anything else. It could be a charge counter, but of course it has to be an acorn counter because it's a squirrel card, and we're memeing here. Squirrels you control get +1/+1 for each acorn counter on Chitter Spitter. So basically it's an anthem effect, right? Every time you sacrifice a token, and it doesn't have to be a squirrel token, but it can be any token, right? It can be clue, food, whatever else, spirits. But all your squirrels get bigger and bigger for each time you feed the Chitter Spitter. And then it also has the ability to pay a green and tap to create 1 green squirrel. And obviously the more acorn counters on it, the larger the squirrel will actually be in practice when you generate it. So this could be tap make a 4/4, make a 5/5 if it goes on long enough, which is pretty cool. Again, it's a bit of a silly meme card, but again, if you're building tribal squirrels, this is probably one of the better decks for your tribal squirrels deck, to be honest. It's pretty sweet. I do enjoy it. Okay, last but not least, we have endurance. Sorry, last but not least, in our mythic cycle of elemental incarnation, this is what I meant to say. We have endurance. So this is a 1 and green 3/4 elemental incarnation with flash and reach. So this is like the definition of surprise reach. The ability is a little bit lackluster, which is why I'm just like not very high on it. When it enters the battlefield, up to one target player puts all the cards from their graveyard onto the bottom of their library in a random order. So it's like, it hoses somebody like trying to go for like a reanimator play, or like who's like, somebody just cast Mizzix's Mastery and just put that card on the stack, and now you like flash an endurance to like get rid of their graveyard and blow them out. So it's like, it's a silver bullet kind of card. So again, this is going to be an example of like, you're going to know if you want this card based on what your own metagame looks like. I'm not a big fan of it generally for my own personal metagame. But again, if people are doing like abusive graveyard things all the time, then this is a decent way to shut some of that down from happening. At least it's a one-shot effect. Because it does hit the entire graveyard simultaneously. Putting it on the bottom of your library, though, is a bit of a weird... I don't even know if I would call that a downside. Because, like, obviously, like, the better scenario would be to exile it. But, of course, exiling graveyards is much more in black's color pie than green's. So, it's fair that this can't do that. But it does mean that you're also letting your opponent, like, reshuffle a bunch of potentially very good cards into their library, right? So, it's okay. I suspect, again, this one is far more targeted at Modern, for whatever reasons, than Commander. But that's okay. This is, after all, Modern Horizons and not Commander Horizons. The fact that this set is as good as it is for Commander is already pretty amazing, so I'm not going to complain that a few of the flashy mythics aren't for Commander players. That's fine. Our next one is Fey Offering. It's a pretty cool card with a reasonably difficult setup cost, but it's pretty good. Like, it's pretty good if it works. So it's 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you've cast both a creature spell and a non-creature spell, you get to make a clue, a food, and a treasure. So not one of these. You get to make all 3 of them, but you have to cast both a creature and a non-creature spell for it to trigger. So the setup cost is reasonably high, right? That's a fairly like narrow subset of options that you have there. Because that's going to cost you a bit of mana, and you need to be able to do it like repeatedly in order to get value. You're going to run out of gas eventually, I think, is the biggest problem here. But it's a cool card, and it's an interesting build around. And notably, it also is at the end of each end step. So if somehow, for whatever reason, you're able to do this on your own turn, and then also on even one of your opponent's turns, you're getting a lot of value. Like, a lot of value. I just don't know how realistic actually getting this to work is. Like, you might get 1 or 2 triggers, but is that worth putting the card in your deck? Maybe, maybe not. You be the judge. It's cool, though, and I like that it exists, because it definitely like lets you like kind of try to live that dream a little bit. Next one I want to talk about is Foundation Breaker. So this is a throwback to the Lorwyn cycle of elementals with evoke that have like a spell ability as their enter the battlefield ability. So we're thinking things like Muldrifter being a copy of Divination with evoke, Shriekmaw being terror with evoke. There's other ones as well, but those are probably like the 2 most commonly played ones, I would say, in Commander. So now we have Naturalize with evoke, which is what Foundation Breaker is. So it's a 4 mana 2/2. That says when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. So, Naturalize. But you can evoke it for 2, which is what Naturalize costs. So basically, the evoke cost is the spell cost. And then you can hard cast it for more. Like, you're basically getting an overcosted body, but with a reasonable effect. But the reason it's overcosted is because it's giving you that option to evoke it. Notably, evoke is really cool because it does... trigger sacrifice matters mechanics as well as enter the battlefield abilities, which like an actual factual Naturalize would not do. So again, if you have like Yarok or Panharmonicon and you cast Foundation Breaker, you do get to double that ability before it sacrifices itself, which is pretty powerful. Definitely a very cool card. Like I said, definitely an instant include in your Yarok decks, I think. And maybe in other decks like that care about enter the battlefield abilities like Chulane and things like that. or you can evoke it for 2 and then bounce it to your hand with Chulane's ability before having to sacrifice it. Things like that. There's synergies to be had. And again, as with every creature with evoke ever, it's a really good combination with cards like Ephemerate, where with the evoke trigger on the stack, that would force you to sacrifice it. You, of course, blink it with Ephemerate, and then it comes back, gets its ability again, and you don't have to sacrifice it anymore. Very cool card, I think. Okay. Moving on to like what I am going to guess is probably like the most controversial card in the set, at least based on my my understanding of it so far from what I've seen in the chatter, is Gaia's Will, which is yet another broken reserveless card that has been turned into a suspend version of itself, but notably in this case also color shifted. So Gaia's Will is of course a suspend version of Yawgmoth's Will, which is a very, very infamous card for anyone who's ever played any Storm in Legacy, or no, not Legacy, it's banned in Legacy I'm pretty sure, but in Vintage or in Cube Online, Yawgmoth's Will is 2 and a black, and then it basically lets you, until the end of turn, play lands and cast spells from your graveyard as though they were in your hand. And you know, if a card would be put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile that card instead, so you don't get to like loot them over and over, but each one gets an additional 1-shot rebuy. Now, a lot of people are very upset that this got reprinted as a green card as opposed to a black card, which of course the original was. I saw a really interesting interview, or like it was like one of Mark Rosewater's blog posts where people basically ask him, why is this card green? Isn't it a black card? Why did you give this to green? Because there's a bit of a rhetoric right now where like green is getting everybody's effects. Green is overrepresented. Green's color pie is not being respected anymore. Like it's just getting effects from every color, which is largely true, to be fair. Oh yeah. Welcome in, Chris. Welcome on in. This is what I'm talking about. I basically believe that it is fine for this card to be green because, as Mark Rosewater said, the card in the design file originally, he had it pegged as a green card. The other set designer, who was the lead designer on the set, had it pegged as a black card. And obviously, because the set designer wanted it to be a black card, it got to be a black card. But I firmly believe that, again, this card is fine in green. It's not like, yes, this is objectively a green card. I actually think that if anything, this card should be a black card or a red card, personally. I think that this is actually, at least according to the modern design philosophy, I believe that this card should be red. In that it is essentially like giving you that sort of until the end of turn, you may cast these cards kind of effect, which red very much does right now. So I'm actually a little surprised that it's not reprinted as a red card, but I think this was kind of Morrow just finally kind of getting his green version that he always wanted. But again, green is not a stranger to recurring cards from the graveyard. Yes, this is doing it in a way that is a little bit alien to what green does. I need to shave my mustache as a completely unrelated side note. It keeps tickling my nostrils and it is driving me up the wall. But anyway, but I do think that it is fine for this effect of being green. It is green adjacent enough that I don't believe it is as egregious of a color pie break as other detractors are claiming. That being said, I do think that if we want it to be like completely like the most true to modern color philosophy possible, it should be red. But hey, that's neither here nor there because it's not black or red. It is green. And here we are. Here's the obligatory amazing art shout out for green on a card that is not very good, but the art is ridiculously delightful. It's actually another Nils Ham piece, which is mostly just leading me to further believe that Nils Ham is a genius. This card is just adorably delightful. It's a fun little callback to Gilder Baron as well. So this is Glimmer Baron instead of Gilder Baron, but yeah, it's kind of great. Bloris in the chat says, I missed the first half of the set review. Can you restart? Yeah, absolutely. Let me go all the way back to, no, absolutely go to hell. I love you, but not that much. I will be uploading these to YouTube, so anyone who is walking in halfway through this and whatnot, I will, feel free to check the YouTube videos. I'll be posting them on the Discord when they are live and edited. A nutty deck with squirrels in it. I see the joke there, Project. Well done, well played. Okay, moving on though, to some more interesting ones. So we've got Herd Bailoff next, which I actually think is a very, very cool card. This is an infinite combo waiting to happen, which friend of the stream Marwich pointed out in our in the EDH Discord that I'm a part of. So it's a 3-mana, or sorry, 3-mana, a 5-mana 4/4 that says whenever you put one or more +1/+1 counters on Herd Bailoff, you may make a 4/4 green beast creature token. So this combos instantly with Cathar's Crusade, which says whenever a creature enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So basically the loop here is you have a Cathar's Crusade out, you play Herd Bailoff, Cathar's Crusade sees that enter, it puts a 1/1 counter on it. Then Herd Bailoff sees the 1/1 counter, makes a 4/4. Cathar's Crusade sees the 4/4, puts a 1/1 counter on everything, including Herd Bailoff, which makes another 4/4. So this actually just literally goes infinite. I actually think this just like... Actually, yeah, I just realized this literally loops the game. This actually draws the game with Cathar's Crusade. Because I don't believe... Oh, no, never mind, it doesn't. This is, in fact, a May trigger. They thought about this. So you can eventually opt not to do that. However, this does, with Cathar's Crusade, make an arbitrarily large amount of 4/4 creatures, which is pretty silly. And kind of a cool synergy. Not that we needed like many more ways to like make Cathar's Crusade broken, but now it is actually just part of an infinite mana loop. Combos with the 4-mana elf, says Loris in the chat. You are almost certainly right, except that I don't remember what card you're talking about. Oh, are you talking about Ivy League Denizen? It's actually a 3-mana elf, and you're right. It does combo with Ivy League Denizen as well. Or Ivy Lane Denizen. But yes, it does. You are correct. So basically, this card is a combo machine. And apparently, you don't even need to be in white for it. It can actually just combo in mono green as well, which is pretty gross. Sweet card, incidentally. Is Denizen 4 mana? Okay, fair enough. I definitely remembered it as a 3-mana creature, but if it's 4 mana, that's fine. It's cool. Next, we have one of my favorite cards of the set, even though I don't currently have an EDH deck that I actually get to play it in. But Ignoble Hierarch, which is just a very on-the-nose callback, of course, to Noble Hierarch. Noble Hierarch was, of course, from the shards, the Bant Shard of Alara, and tapped for green, blue, and white. This one is from Jund, and therefore taps for green, red, and black. It still has Exalted. It is still a 1 green for an 0/1. It's the literal same card. It just taps for green and black, or sorry, for red and black instead of for blue and white. It's a cool card. It's a fun little design, little tongue-in-cheek reference. You know, I suspect most green Jund decks are going to want to play this in Commander, realistically. The biggest restriction to this is that it's only Jund Plus that gets to play this, which is a relatively narrow set of Commander decks, the same way that Noble Hierarch would go in all of my Bant Plus decks, but I don't have one of those. But I would play it if I did. And that's kind of just how she goes. But yeah, great card, and obviously a huge staple for Modern, I'm certain. Moving on. Ooh, Sanctum Weaver. This card is great. It's, again, kind of a narrow card in that it is very, very, very much how much do you care about enchantments. If you don't, this card is not for you. If you do, this card is fan-freaking-tastic. So 1 and a green for an enchantment creature Dryad. So notably, it entering the battlefield will trigger all of your other Constellation-style synergies in and of itself. And then it's a mana dork after that. But it's like a chunky mana dork because it says add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So yeah, basically, if you have 3 enchantments, this just taps with 3 mana. It's a 2-mana creature that taps for 3 mana, 4 mana, 5 mana. Like, I don't know how many enchantments you're going to have, but yeah, sky's kind of the limit. This card's really cool. And notably, it always taps for at least 1 mana because it is itself an enchantment and will count itself. So as long as you have literally 1 other enchantment, it will tap for 2 mana, which is already like very good for a 2-mana mana dork. Super, super good card, but only for the Enchantress Matters decks. If you don't care about enchantments, this card does nothing for you. But if you do, it's really good. Moving on, we've got like some more squirrel silliness things. Scurry Oak, obviously another delightful dad joke on Scary Oak, but scurry because it's covered in squirrels. Get it? And they're scurrying around. Ha 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 ha. Decent card. So again, this one cares about getting counters put on it. This is actually another one that goes infinite with Ivy League. This actually also goes infinite with Ivy Lane Denizen, ironically, because again, Ivy Lane Denizen says whenever a green creature enters the battlefield, you may put a 1/1 counter on target creature, and then this one gets a 1/1 counter and makes another squirrel. So again, the stock on Ivy Lane Denizen, I'm very thankful that that card is a common, because yeah, it turns out there are just 2 new creatures that literally just go infinite by themselves with that card. So that's pretty cool. And yes, to Projez's comment in the chat, the set is great. The set is honestly great. Like there are just so many new cards for Commander for like every possible player. New decks being opened up as possibilities. Old decks getting new sweet cards. Like just lots of good stuff. Not much to dislike about it. Squirrel Sanctuary is a 1-mana enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, you may make a 1/1 green squirrel token. And it says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you may pay 1 mana, and if you do, return the Sanctuary to its owner's hand, which of course then allows you to recast it and get another squirrel. So basically, the more things die that are not your squirrels, the more you get to make more squirrels. It's a little wonky and a little complicated, but it's kind of fun, and I sort of dig it. Squirrel Sovereign, just straight up just Squirrel Lord. It's a 2-mana 2/2 that makes all your squirrels stick. That's the card. Sylvan Anthem is a pretty cool one. So this is basically the green Honor of the Pure. So rather than white creatures get +1/+1, or white creatures you control get +1/+1, it is green creatures you control get +1/+1, and has the additional bonus rider of whenever a green creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. This card's really good in a go-wide green deck. This is actually one of the cards that I think people are more justifiably upset about in terms of color pie breakage, where like anthems are pretty decidedly white effects. There are a couple of green anthems historically, but this one is just literally Honor of the Pure, but better for green creatures. So it's like a little bit insulting that like the best anthem color just had one of its best anthems like superseded by a green card. That being said, it is undeniable that this is a very good green card. So if you were playing a go-wide green deck, this card is really good for you. Because notably, it also says green creature, which means that green tokens against squirrels, saprolings, insects, like whatever like sort of mass-produced green tokens, each of those entering will all separately scry 1, which is pretty dang good. Next we have Terramorph, which is sort of the most recent play on the sort of oh my goodness, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the most recent play on the explosive vegetation variants. I was actually down on this card initially until I realized exactly what it does, which is the lands don't come into play untapped that you get off of this. So for 4 mana, you search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. It doesn't say put it on the battlefield tapped. So it's like 4 mana for like a sort of pseudo rampant growth effect, but really it's like 3 mana, assuming you didn't tap out. And even if you did, you can still cast a 1 mana spell afterwards, which is pretty good. And then notably, it has a rebound. So Explosive Vegetation, for reference, is 4 mana, search your library for 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library. This one gives it to you in installments, but the cool part is that the rebound happens next turn. Next turn, you're paying 0 mana for that effect, and you're actually just getting another land into play untapped for 0 mana, which is actually just straight up accelerating you that turn, rather than like most rampant growth style effects setting you up for the next turn. This one actually gets you the turn that it resolves on the rebound turn, which is actually like a pretty big deal. So I think this card is actually really good. Holy crap, Boris, you just scared... Wait, Boris or Bloris? Oh, what the heck? Boris TF2 just subscribed. Well, thank you for the subscription, Boris TF2. What? That has to be you, right? Oh, you subscribed via YouTube? Is that a thing? I've never even seen that. Also, that notification was very loud, and I apologize if it shocked everybody else, because it gave me a freaking heart attack. But thank you for the resubscription, buddy. I appreciate it, as always. It means a lot that that you're supporting the stream and the content in this way. But yeah, so Terramorph, it's not an incredible card or anything, but it actually does, like I said, because the land comes into play untapped, the turn it rebounds is actually like a very potentially strong turn, which is sweet. Okay, the next one is Thrasta, Tempest's Roar. So it is 10 green for a 7/7. However, it costs 3 less to cast for each other spell cast this turn. So it essentially like has like a storm payoff, kind of, basically. Like the more things you've done, the cheaper it is. So I guess the cheapest it could possibly be is green, but you would have been required to cast 4 spells that turn. This being your 5th spell, which is not out of the question, certainly, but also probably not that doable. That being said, casting 3 spells or even 2 spells and making this either like a 3-mana creature or a 5-mana creature isn't that bad. It has Trample and Haste. It also has Trample over Planeswalkers, which is like a really wonky line of text, but basically means that it has Trample, like, because Trample specifically applies to creatures, right? If they block this with a 3/3, you'll Trample 4 damage over to the opponent. Similarly, with Planeswalkers in this iteration, if your Planeswalker has 3 loyalty, normally an attack sent at a Planeswalker just soaks all the damage, period. But if Thrasta attacks a Planeswalker, excess damage will also be dealt to the opponent controlling that Planeswalker, which is, I don't know, a bit of a random trample over players. Yeah, that'd be something, wouldn't it, Boris? It's a bit of a weird line of text. I don't know how necessary or relevant it is. I'm guessing that this card is a card that they actually think has a shot at seeing constructed play, where that might be more relevant, because I'm just struggling to think of a situation where trample over Planeswalkers in Commander is like particularly relevant. Like, it's not irrelevant, obviously. Like, it's still just free bonus damage. But like, I don't know. I'm not hype about it. It's weird. It's fine. Also, notably, it has hexproof as long as it entered the battlefield this turn. So basically, yeah, it's good with if it's wearing a sword. But then that's like extra mana that you had to cast, though, or whatever. Because like, then you also have to pay another 2 mana on top of all the mana you've already paid to equip it. Like, you're not wrong in that it is good with swords and Planeswalkers specifically. But I don't know. It's fine. I'm just like, I'm not. It seems like it seems a little cute. It's a bit over-engineered, I think. And then it has hexproof as long as it enters the battlefield this turn. So basically, the turn it enters, it is unkillable, or hard to kill anyway. But after that, it's just kind of sitting around as a 7/7, which like further makes me like wonder, like, I don't know. It's a very, very flashy, interesting card that I suspect will ultimately not do a lot, unfortunately. The next card is a throwback to, one of the better green cards of all time, and frankly, one of my favorite cards of all time, in the form of Timeless Witness, which, of course, as I said, is a throwback to Eternal Witness. So Eternal Witness is a 3-mana 2/1 that says when it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. This card does the exact same thing for 1 extra mana, but it also has Eternalize for 7, so it's not like you're getting a discount on this or anything, but still, you're basically getting, an extra bite at the apple without spending an extra card, and, it'll come back as a 7-mana 4/4 that regrows a card. You're not writing home about it, but it's a very strong effect, and even just having another Ewit in the format, even if it costs 1 more, it's another body that does that same effect. It's just really strong. Also, I just want to shout out the art, because this art is fantastic. It's such a beautiful callback to the original Eternal Witness art, but it's really fun because it really does have a very Amonkhet feel to it, in that like the vegetation very much is pulled from the set design of Amonkhet, as well as like it being a height. Like, I think the other, I don't remember what the animal accompanying her last time was. There may not even have been one, but I really liked that it has a hyena on it. Like, it's just a really, really good, well-designed card with fantastic art. It's a good card. I love it. This card is fantastic, in my opinion. It is not better than Eternal Witness, but it is a very, very welcome second copy of Eternal Witness, which is good enough for me. Speaking of cards that are freaking fantastic, Tireless Provisioner is, again, if we're talking about, again, throwback references, Tireless Provisioner is, of course, a reference to Tireless Tracker, which is another one of the better green cards for Commander. Rather than making clues, this one has landfall, make either a food or a treasure. So it basically makes one of the two other artifact sack tokens that exist in the game at the moment. I guess technically gold exists, but they've mostly ignored gold. Treasure kind of just, or gold kind of just became treasure, and we kind of just don't talk about gold anymore. But yeah, basically it gives you either mana acceleration or a life buffer, or just some random artifacts if those matter to you. Is this card better than Tireless Tracker? On the balance, no, especially because it doesn't have that additional rider of like sacking one of these things to get bigger itself. However, it is still very, very useful, and very flexible, and I think it's a really good card. And definitely I would recommend, if you're playing Tireless Tracker in your commander decks right now, you might want to think about playing Provisioner as well. It is not better, but it is very, very interesting. Also, somebody pointed out that it looks like she's holding a breadstick, and I can't unsee that, and so as a result, now neither can you. So the breadstick is, of course, the food token now. Urban Daggertooth, now we're not talking about that. That card's whatever. Verdant Command is a very interesting sort of cheeky riff on the command cycles. It actually is like a full-on like 4-mode command. It costs 2 mana rather than like, like the 4, 5, 6 mana that most commands cost. And of course the abilities are scaled accordingly. So it has target player creates 2 tapped squirrel tokens. Counter target loyalty ability of a planeswalker, which is like very, very specific, but could be powerful, right? If somebody is, obviously like the dream scenario, somebody's about to alt their planeswalker and do something really stupid. And you're just like, nope, screw that. And also get some squirrels. That's kind of fun. Exile target card from a graveyard. So again, you can kind of just snipe somebody's reanimator target in a pinch. Or just, good old-fashioned gain 3 life, if nothing else. Basically, the default modes on this card, I think, are going to most often be the exile a card from a graveyard and make some squirrels. But again, once in a while, gaining 3 life will be relevant. And once in a while, countering a planeswalker ability is going to be like some sick blowout. It's a fun little card. I don't expect it to see a ton of commander play, although most squirrel tribal decks are probably just going to play it for the memes and because squirrels. But it's a cool card. I feel like I'd be remiss not to address it. And that is it in terms of new cards for the set. I just as I did with Chance Encounter, I do want to point out that Titania getting a reprint is a big game. This card was getting very expensive, and I just think it's really cool that there are more of them in circulation now. It's a fantastic Magic card. Like, it really just is a great card for Commander. Also, it means that they actually are reprinting her tokens, which currently only existed as like dual-sided tokens, which, at least for me, I hate. And so I'm glad to just have like actual just 5/3 elemental tokens that exist in Magic now, that are nothing else. But yeah, just a brief aside there. Okay, and then we have